They say the Emperor protects. I believed this once, with the fervor of the faithful, with the certainty of the ignorant. I was a loyal servant of the Imperium, a clerk in the vast machinery of his domain, and I trusted that when salvation came, it would arrive with mercy and grace. I was wrong. Salvation came in the form of gods made metal, walking cathedrals of destruction that shook the earth with every step. The Emperor protects, yes, but no one tells you that his angels of death stand 55 meters tall, and when they walk through your city to save it, they kill more people than the enemy ever could. My name is Aaron Vash, and before the angels came, I was nobody important. Just another administrative clerk in Hive Secundus, processing tithe records on tertium level. Middle management in the most literal sense. 40 billion souls lived in this hive, stacked vertically across 15 kilometers of habitation blocks, manufactorums, and processing centers that had been built and rebuilt over 10,000 years. I lived on level 512 in a modest hab unit with my spouse KL and our daughter Miria, who had just turned 7 years old. The hive was our entire world. I had never seen the planet's surface, never breathed unprocessed air, never witnessed an actual sunrise. None of us had. We were born in the hive, worked in the hive, would die in the hive, and our bodies would be rendered down into corpse starch to feed the next generation. This was not a source of despair, but simply reality, the natural order of things in the Imperium of man. We had purpose, we had structure, we had faith. My days followed a rhythm as predictable as the hive's ventilation cycles. Wake at 0600 hours, perform morning devotions before the small shrine in our hab's corner, the golden Aquila watching over us with its twin-headed gaze. Kyle would prepare breakfast, a protein paste sweetened with synthetic honey. While Miria complained about her Schola preparatory assignments, I would don my administratum robes, gray and unremarkable, bearing the small brass pin that marked me as a clerk third class in the Department of Tithe Assessment and Collection. The work itself was mind-numbing but necessary. I processed records of agricultural production from agri-worlds 3 sectors away, calculated the Emperor's due, and ensured that every bushel of grain, every liter of water, every protein bar was properly accounted for in the endless ledgers. The Imperium ran on such details, on millions of clerks like me ensuring the machine of state ground forward without pause. I took pride in my accuracy. My supervisor had commended me twice in the past year for maintaining error rates below 0.03%. Kale worked in water reclamation, managing the purification systems that recycled every drop of moisture in our section of the hive. It was skilled work, requiring technical knowledge and a tolerance for the smell of filtration chemicals that never quite washed out of their clothes. We had met 12 years ago at a devotional service, bonded over our shared commitment to the Emperor's work, married within the year as was proper and expected. Miria was our joy, our purpose beyond duty. She attended the preparatory schola that fed students into the vast imperial bureaucracy, learning the catechisms and basic literacy that would determine her eventual placement. She was bright, quick with numbers, and I harbored secret hopes that she might test well enough for a position in the administratum proper, perhaps even reaching clerk second class by the time she was 30. A better life than we had, elevation through service, the dream of every hive parent. Our hab unit was small but sufficient. 3 rooms total, a combined living and eating space, a sleeping chamber for Kale and myself, and a smaller alcove where Miria slept. The walls were bare rockcrete, painted a light gray that had yellowed over the decades. We had a picked viewer that received official Imperial broadcasts, a small cooking unit, and a compact ablution station. The luxury was the window, an actual transparent panel that looked out over the interior of the hive, showing the lights of 10,000 other habs stretching away into the vertical distance. On that window, on a clear day when the smog levels were low, you could see all the way across the 3-kilometer width of our section to the far wall. You could watch the worker shifts changing in the manufactorums below, rivers of humanity flowing through designated corridors. You could see the supply lifts ascending and descending, carrying goods and materials between levels. You could watch the patrol routes of the Adeptus Arbites, maintaining order with their shock mauls and shotguns. It was from that window that I first noticed something was wrong. The changes were subtle at first, easy to dismiss. The voxcasters that played hymns and work chants throughout the day began including more martial songs, litanies of battle and sacrifice. The PDF forces, the planetary defense troopers who normally occupied the lower hive levels, started appearing in our section with greater frequency. They moved in formation, combat gear ready, heading upward toward the spire levels where the wealthy and powerful resided. At work, my supervisor mentioned in passing that we were implementing emergency protocols for resource distribution. Nothing to concern ourselves with, just prudent preparation. The governor had ordered all departments to review their contingency procedures. Routine, really. Happened every few years when pirate raids threatened the system. But this felt different. There was a tension in the recycled air, a nervousness in the crowds that thronged the transit corridors. People spoke in hushed voices, sharing rumors that grew more elaborate and terrifying with each retelling. Xenos in the outer system, heretics on a neighboring world, a warp storm disrupting shipping lanes. Then came the official announcement, broadcast simultaneously to every voxcaster in the hive. "Citizens of Hive Secundus," the mechanically amplified voice declared, its tone carefully calibrated to project authority without inducing panic. "This is Governor Hestor with an important message. Enemy forces have been detected in the upper spire levels. The nature of the threat is being assessed. All citizens are instructed to continue their normal duties. Remain calm. Trust in the Emperor's protection. The planetary defense forces are responding to the situation. Further updates will be provided as appropriate. The Emperor protects." The message repeated 3 times. Then the voxcasters returned to their normal broadcast of hymns. That evening, Kael and I discussed what it might mean while Miria played with her toy servitor, a mechanical doll that walked in small circles and recited simple prayers. "Enemy forces in the spire," Kael said quietly, not wanting to alarm our daughter. That could mean anything. Could be a cult uprising. Those happen sometimes in the upper levels. Bored aristocrats dabbling in forbidden practices. I nodded, wanting to believe it was something so mundane. But I had seen the PDF moving in force. Full combat loadouts. Heavy weapons teams. That suggested something more serious than a cult that could be put down with a few squads of enforcers. "The Imperium will handle it," I said. More to reassure myself than Kael. "We have survived worse. The hive has stood for 6,000 years. Kael smiled, but their eyes betrayed concern. "Of course. The Emperor protects." We performed our evening devotions with particular fervor that night, kneeling before our shrine, reciting the prayers we had known since childhood. I asked the Emperor to watch over the PDF soldiers heading into danger. I asked him to protect our hive, our home, our family. I asked him to grant wisdom to those in authority who would decide our fate. I believed he heard me. I believed he would answer. The next day at work, the emergency became real. Evacuation orders were issued for levels 800 through 1000, the highest residential sections below the actual spire where the nobility lived. Millions of people ordered to descend to lower levels, bringing only what they could carry. I watched through the administratum's viewing ports as the refugees began to flow past our level. They came in an endless river, faces pale with shock and fear. Many were injured, burns and lacerations hastily bandaged. Some were mad, gibbering about things they had seen, terrible things that made no sense. I saw a woman, her expensive clothes torn and stained, clutching a small child and weeping uncontrollably. I saw an elderly man, his augmetic eye sparking and malfunctioning, being supported by 2 younger people who might have been his children. I saw PDF troopers with the 1,000-yard stare of men who had seen combat and barely survived it. My supervisor ordered us to assist with processing the refugees, documenting their identities, and assigning temporary housing in the lower levels. The work was overwhelming, thousands of people per hour flooding through our checkpoints, each one with a story of terror and loss. I interviewed a young man, perhaps 20 years old, who had worked as a servant in one of the Spire households. His hands shook as he spoke. "They came 3 days ago," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The word-bearers, traitor Astartes in crimson armor. They took the cathedral, the governor's personal chapel. They killed the priests, desecrated the altars, and began performing rituals." "Rituals?" I asked, my stylus pausing above my data slate. "Summoning rituals." The young man's eyes were wide, pupils dilated. They brought something through, something from the warp. The air itself began to bleed, and the walls screamed, and people just changed, twisted into things that weren't human anymore. I documented his testimony with growing horror, each word another confirmation that this was not a simple uprising. This was chaos, the eternal enemy, the corruption that had torn the Imperium apart 10,000 years ago during the Horus Heresy and still festered in the galaxy's dark corners. When my shift finally ended, I hurried home through corridors packed with displaced people. The normal, orderly flow of hive traffic had broken down into chaos. People camped in doorways, families huddled together with their meager possessions, children crying from hunger and fear. Our hab was untouched, blessedly normal in the midst of madness. Miria ran to me when I entered, wrapping her small arms around my waist. "Papa, there are so many people in the corridors," she said. "Why are they all here?" I picked her up, holding her close. "There is trouble in the upper levels, little one. These people need our help until it is safe for them to return home. Will the soldiers stop the trouble?" "Yes," I said, hoping it was true. "The soldiers will stop it." But that night, lying in the darkness next to Kale, I confessed my doubts. "It's chaos," I whispered. "Traitor Astartes. If the PDF could handle them, they would have already. This is going to get worse before it gets better." Kael was silent for a long moment. "Should we leave? Go lower in the hive. We could head to the underhive if necessary. Against orders? That would be desertion of assigned quarters. They could execute us for that. They could execute us for staying if the Chaos forces come this far down." It was a valid point, and I had no good answer. We lay in the darkness, listening to the muffled sounds of the refugee camps outside our door, and tried to sleep. The following day, the sky changed. The hive's upper levels were burning. From my office window, I could see smoke, thick and black, descending from above. The emergency lumens that normally provided the illusion of day had taken on a red tinge, as if the very light were tainted by what was happening above us. The Voxcasters crackled with a new announcement. "Citizens of Hive Secundus, the Adeptus Astartes have been deployed to combat the enemy threat. Elements of the Raven Guard chapter are engaging the enemy in the upper spire. Victory is inevitable. The Emperor protects. Space Marines. The Emperor's finest warriors, genetically enhanced transhuman soldiers who had defended the Imperium for 10 millennia. If they were here, then the situation was truly dire. But also, if they were here, then surely we would be saved." Space Marines did not fail. I allowed myself to feel hope for the first time in days. The angels of death would purge the traitors. The chaos, corruption would be burned away. We would survive this. I was processing refugee documentation when the commotion began. Shouting from the corridors outside the administratum offices, the sound of heavy footsteps running, then a crash that shook the entire floor. I turned just in time to see something smash through the ceiling 10 meters away. It fell in a shower of rockcrete and twisted metal. landing with a wet thud on the office floor. It had been a servitor once, a lobotomized human converted into a living tool for the Imperium's use. But chaos had changed it. Its flesh had melted and reformed into impossible shapes, extra limbs sprouting from its torso, eyes opening in random places across its skin. Its Vox unit still functioned, broadcasting a continuous stream of blasphemous prayers in languages that hurt to hear. 3 of my co-workers were crushed when it fell. 2 others were caught by its flailing limbs as it thrashed in its death throes, bones snapping like dry twigs. I ran. Pure instinct, no thought, just the overwhelming need to escape. I heard others screaming, heard the servitor's mechanical parts grinding as it tried to rise despite its fatal injuries, heard the emergency klaxons beginning to wail. I did not stop running until I reached our hab level, pushing through the crowds, ignoring the protests of those I shoved aside. I burst through our door to find Kale packing emergency supplies into a rucksack. They looked up at me, saw the blood on my robes, the wild look in my eyes. "We're leaving," Kale said, not asking, stating. "Right now. Going down. I don't care about the orders." I wanted to argue, wanted to cite regulations and proper procedures. But I had just watched 3 people I worked with every day get crushed by a thing that should not exist. Regulations suddenly seemed less important than survival. "Yes," I said. We packed quickly. Essential items only. Water purification tablets, protein bars, a change of clothes each, our identification documents, a small pict of our wedding day, the only personal item we allowed ourselves, and my faith, the small Aquila pendant I wore around my neck, given to me by my father before he died. Miria was confused, frightened by our urgency, but she obeyed without complaint. We dressed her in her sturdiest clothes, gave her a small pack to carry with her favorite toy and some food. As we prepared to leave, I heard it for the first time, a sound that would haunt me for the rest of my life. A deep vibration, too low to truly hear, felt more than heard. It resonated in my chest, in my bones, in the very structure of the hive around us. The windows rattled in their frames. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. The lumens flickered. "What is that?" Kale asked, their voice tight with fear. I did not know. Not yet. But somewhere deep in my instincts, some primal part of my brain recognized it for what it was. The footsteps of gods. 3 days passed in a blur of fear and false hope. Kale and I had decided to wait, to trust in the authorities one more time before abandoning our assigned quarters. The penalty for unauthorized movement during emergency protocols could be severe, and we had Miria to consider. So we stayed, watching the situation deteriorate from our window, listening to the Voxcasters as they broadcast increasingly urgent updates. The Space Marines were fighting. We could hear the distant thunder of bolter fire, the crack of power weapons cleaving through armor and flesh. But the word-bearers were entrenched, and they had brought something worse than themselves into our hive. Daemons. Creatures of the warp given physical form through profane rituals and human sacrifice. The refugees continued to flood downward through our level, an endless river of humanity fleeing the carnage above. Their stories grew worse with each wave. The upper levels were not just occupied, they were transformed. Reality itself was breaking down where the chaos forces had established their stronghold. Buildings twisted into impossible geometries. The laws of physics became suggestions. Time flowed differently, and space folded in on itself. A woman stumbled past our hab block, her face covered in burns. I heard her tell a PDF trooper that she had watched her husband age 50 years in 5 minutes, his body withering to dust while she remained unchanged. Another refugee, a manufactorum foreman, described walls that bled when touched, and corridors that led to places that could not exist within the hive's architecture. I worked from our hab, processing documentation remotely through the hive's data network. The administratum demanded that records be maintained, even in crisis, as if the proper filing of casualty reports could impose order on the chaos consuming our world. Perhaps it could, in a way. Perhaps by documenting the horror, we asserted that it was real, comprehensible, something that could be understood and ultimately defeated. But the numbers told a grim story. 12 million refugees displaced so far. Estimated casualties in the upper levels exceeding 2 million and rising. PDF losses at 30% and climbing. 3 Space Marine casualties confirmed. Their gene seed recovered. That last number disturbed me most. If the Emperor's angels could die, what hope did the rest of us have? On the third night, the sky changed. I was at our window, unable to sleep, watching the lights of the hive shimmer through the smoke that now filled even the lower levels. The ventilation systems were struggling, overwhelmed by the volume of burning materials from above. Every breath tasted of ash and chemicals. Then the upper hive levels exploded with light. Not the orange glow of fire, but something else. Purple and green and colors that had no names. Warp energies unleashed in quantities that defied belief. The illumination was wrong, painful to look at, making my eyes water and my head ache. I could see it even from 70 levels below. A cathedral, the governor's personal place of worship, had been transformed into a massive 8-pointed star, the symbol of chaos undivided. Each point of the star was a tower of flesh and metal, pulsing with unholy light. And at the center, something was emerging. Something vast and terrible, pushing its way through the barrier between the material realm and the Imperium. The voxcasters shrieked with static, then cleared. A new voice, not the governor's measured tones, but something harsh and filled with authority. Citizens of Hive Secundus, this is Lord Castellanvaro of the Planetary Defense Forces. The situation in the upper spire has escalated beyond conventional military response. The enemy has established a summoning site and is attempting to manifest a greater demon of the ruinous powers. If successful, the entire hive will fall to corruption within hours. The voice paused, and I could hear the sound of weapons fire in the background, officers shouting orders, the organized chaos of a command center at war. By order of the planetary governor and with the blessing of the Adeptus Mechanicus, we have requested the deployment of Titan assets. Legio Metallica has answered our call. The god machines will deploy within 6 hours to purge the corrupted sections of the hive. All citizens within 2 kilometers of the main processional avenue are advised to evacuate to lower levels immediately. The Emperor protects. Titans. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. I knew of them, of course. Every citizen of the Imperium knew of the Collegia Titanica, the Titan legions that served the Adeptus Mechanicus. Walking war machines the size of buildings, crewed by princeps whose minds were directly interfaced with their god machines through ancient technology that bordered on the mystical. They were humanity's answer to the greatest threats. When Xenos, Titans, or gargantuan creatures or massed armor needed to be destroyed, when a world's very survival hung in the balance, the Titans were unleashed. They were the ultimate expression of the Imperium's might. Weapons so powerful that entire battlefields were reshaped by their passage. But I had never heard of them being deployed in a hive city. The processional avenue they mentioned was the main vertical artery of our hive, a massive corridor 500 meters wide that ran from the underhive all the way to the spire, designed to accommodate bulk cargo haulers and troop movements. But it ran through densely populated areas, through commercial districts and residential levels and industrial zones. If Titans walked that path, anything in their way would be destroyed. Kyle appeared beside me at the window, having heard the announcement. Their face was pale in the sickly light from above. 2 kilometers from the processional, they said quietly. Aaron, that includes our level. I consulted my mental map of the hive's layout. Our hab block was approximately 3 kilometers from the processional's nearest point, just outside the evacuation zone. We should be safe. Should be, Kale repeated. But Titans are not precise. You have seen the refugees. You know what war does to hive infrastructure. I did know. Buildings collapsed from stray fire. Corridors flooded when water mains ruptured. Power failures leading to ventilation, system breakdowns, and mass suffocation. The hive was a delicate ecosystem, and violence disrupted it in cascading ways. "We pack," I said. "Full emergency supplies. We are ready to move at any moment." Kale looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Something between pity and anger. "You still trust the orders? Even now? What choice do we have? If everyone panics, if everyone tries to evacuate at once, the stairwells will become death traps. More people will die in the crush than from the Titans. The Administratum has protocols for this. They know the load-bearing capacity of the transit infrastructure. They will organize the evacuation properly." Kale said nothing, but began packing supplies with quick, efficient movements. I helped, trying to ignore the sick feeling in my stomach that said my spouse was right to doubt. The next hours were strange. Time seemed to slow and accelerate randomly. I would look at the chronometer and find that only 5 minutes had passed when it felt like an hour, or discover that an hour had vanished in what seemed like moments. The warp energies bleeding into our reality from above were affecting everything, even the basic flow of time. Miri awoke, confused by our activity in the middle of the night. We explained as gently as we could that we might need to leave our home, that there was danger coming, but that the Emperor would protect us. She accepted this with the resilience of children, for whom the world is already full of incomprehensible rules and sudden changes. The Voxcasters began broadcasting emergency instructions, evacuation routes, designated safe zones, lists of supplies to bring and items to leave behind. The voice was calm, methodical, but underneath I could hear the strain. Whoever was reading this script knew they were trying to move millions of people through inadequate infrastructure in impossible timeframes. I went to our window and looked out at the hive around us. Already, people were moving. Families with children, elderly being carried by the young. Groups of workers from the manufactorums heading downward in organized columns. The PDF had established checkpoints at major intersections, directing the flow of humanity, trying to prevent bottlenecks. But there were too many people. Far too many. The stairwells and corridors could not handle this volume. I watched as a crowd at the nearest transit point grew denser, bodies pressing together, people beginning to shove and panic. Then I felt it again. That vibration, that subsonic rumble that resonated in my chest cavity. Stronger this time, closer, and rhythmic, like footsteps, like something impossibly large walking toward us. The lumens throughout our section flickered and died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. The Voxcasters crackled with interference, then broadcast a sound I had never heard before. It was part machine roar, part war horn, part cathedral organ. It was the sound of a Titan announcing its presence. "They are coming," Kale said. "We need to leave. Now. But the evacuation order has not reached our level yet. If we leave now..." "Aaron," Kale interrupted, their voice sharp. "I love you. But if you quote regulations at me one more time while our world is ending, I will strike you. We are leaving. Get Miria." The tone brooked no argument. I got Miria. We joined the flow of refugees in the corridor outside our hab. Thousands of people, all heading for the main stairwell that would take us down to safer levels. The press of bodies was immediate and frightening. I held Miria's hand so tightly I was afraid I would hurt her, terrified of losing her in the crowd. Kale walked ahead, their broad shoulders helping to clear a path. The stairwell was worse. Designed to accommodate perhaps a few hundred people at a time, it now held thousands, packed shoulder to shoulder, descending step by step in a slow, shuffling mass. The air was hot and close, filled with the smell of sweat and fear. People were crying, praying, cursing the authorities who had waited too long to evacuate us. We descended one level, then another. Progress was agonizingly slow. Behind us, more people continued to push into the stairwell, adding their weight to the mass of humanity trying to escape. I felt the vibration again. Stronger, close enough now that it was not just felt but heard. A deep bass thrum that made the stairwell's metal railings hum. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The crowd surged forward in panic, people in the back pushing those in front, trying to move faster, get lower, escape the approaching gods of war. Someone fell ahead of us. An elderly woman, her legs giving out under the strain. The crowd flowed over her like water around a stone. People tried to avoid her, but there was no room to maneuver. I heard her scream, saw hands reaching down to try to help her up, but the pressure of the crowd was too great. She vanished beneath the shuffling feet. I did not see what happened to her, but her screams stopped abruptly. Miria was crying, the sound lost in the general din of thousands of frightened people in an enclosed space. I picked her up, ignoring the pain in my back and arms, holding her above the worst of the crush. Kale looked back, saw what I had done, nodded approval. We descended 3 more levels, 5 total from our starting point. The vibrations were continuous now, each one stronger than the last. The Titans were advancing up the processional, firing their weapons as they came, purging the chaos infestation level by level. And then we heard the first real sound of their passage. Not the vibration, not the war horns, but the actual noise of a Titan walking through a hive city. It was a grinding, tearing, crashing cacophony that defied description. Metal screaming as it tore, rockcrete shattering, entire buildings collapsing with roars like avalanches. The stairwell shook. The lights went out completely, emergency systems failing. In the darkness, the crowd panicked. People screamed, pushed, clawed at each other in desperate attempts to move faster. I felt elbows in my ribs, someone's hand grabbing my robe, pulling me backward. I shoved forward with all my strength, keeping Miria above the crush, feeling Kale's hand grip my shoulder to keep us together. The lights came back on, emergency systems restored. We had descended 2 more levels in the chaos, though I had no memory of traversing the stairs. We were 15 levels below our hab now, among the industrial sectors. The crowds were slightly less dense here, the stairwells feeding into broader corridors. We emerged into a massive manufactorum floor, now converted into an emergency shelter. Hundreds of thousands of people were already here, sprawled across the production lines, huddled in the corners, organized into rough camps by PDF troopers trying to maintain some semblance of order. A Medicae station had been established near the entrance. I saw them treating injuries from the evacuation itself. People with broken bones from falls, crushed limbs from the crowd pressure, heart attacks from the stress and exertion. We found a space near a dormant assembly line, claimed a few square meters as our own. Kale set down our packs. Miria collapsed immediately, exhausted. I realized I was shaking, my muscles quivering from the sustained tension and physical effort. Around us, other refugees were sharing stories, passing information, trying to understand what was happening above us. I listened, piecing together a picture from fragments. The Titans had begun their advance an hour ago, 6 of them in total. 2 warhounds, the smallest class of true Titan, standing 14 meters tall. 2 reavers, larger at 22 meters. 1 warlord, 33 meters of pure destructive power. And 1 imperator, the largest, the most powerful, towering 55 meters above the battlefield. A walking fortress bristling with weapons that could level city blocks. They were advancing up the processional, but processional was a generous term for what was happening. They were walking through the hive itself, their feet crushing hab blocks, their shoulders scraping against buildings, their void shields interacting catastrophically with the hive's power systems and structural supports. An old man, his face covered in ash and blood, described what he had seen from the upper levels before evacuating. "I saw the warhound," he said, his voice hoarse. It put its foot down on a residential block, just stepped on it like you would step on an insect. The entire building collapsed, floors pancaking down. Must have been 500 people in there, maybe more. Gone in an instant. A woman beside him added her own story. The Reaver's shoulder weapon, some kind of plasma cannon, it fired at the enemy positions above. But the backblast, the heat, it melted the support beams in the building behind it. The whole structure just sagged and fell. Thousands dead, and the Titan never even noticed. I held Miria closer, trying to shield her from these stories, but she had already heard too much. Her eyes were wide, uncomprehending. These were the Emperor's angels, the saviors who were supposed to protect us. How could they be the ones causing such destruction? Kale returned from speaking with a PDF trooper, their face grim. The trooper says the Titans will pass within 500 meters of this level. We are outside their direct path, but the structural damage, the collateral effects, he could not guarantee our safety. Then we need to go lower, I said. But even as I spoke, I knew it was impossible. We had barely made it this far. Trying to descend further now, through even more crowded stairwells, with the Titans approaching, would be suicide. We wait, Kale said. We hope. So that is what we did. In a manufactorum that stank of machine oil and human fear, surrounded by 500,000 other refugees, we prayed to the Emperor. We prayed that his angels would save us. We prayed that their salvation would not crush us in the process. We prayed for mercy in a universe that had none to give. And above us, growing ever closer, the Titans came. The vibrations were constant now. One massive footfall after another, each one strong enough to make the entire manufactorum floor tremble. Pieces of equipment began falling from the ceiling. Old pipes, long dormant, cracked and began leaking coolant or water, or worse. The Voxcasters, still somehow functioning despite everything, broadcast a new message. Attention all citizens in the tertium levels. The Titans have engaged the enemy. Hostile forces are being purged. Remain in your designated shelters. Do not attempt to move. The Emperor protects. I wondered if the person who wrote these announcements believed the words, or if they simply recited them because that was their duty. The Emperor protects. It was the most common phrase in the Imperium, spoken billions of times a day across 1 million worlds. But what did it mean when the Emperor's protection came in the form of machines that killed indiscriminately? Miria tugged on my sleeve. "Papa," she said, her voice very small. "When the angels walk, can they see us? Do they know we are here?" I looked down at my daughter, at her face still round with childhood, at her eyes that had seen far too much in the past few days. I wanted to lie, to tell her yes, of course the Titans saw us, of course they cared. But I found I could not. "No, little one," I said quietly. "I do not think they see us. We are too small, and they are too large. To them, we are like insects, individually invisible." "Then why do we call them angels?" she asked. I had no answer. So I held her, and we waited for the angels to pass through our world, and we hoped that we would be fortunate enough to survive their blessing. Morning came, though the concept of morning in a hive is arbitrary at best. The chronometers said it was, 600 hours, time when the lumens would normally brighten to simulate daylight. But the power grid was failing, cycling between emergency lighting and complete darkness. Time lost meaning in the darkness, measured only by the increasingly powerful vibrations that announced the Titan's approach. The PDF had established order in our shelter, organizing us into groups, distributing what meager supplies they had. Water rations were already reduced, 1 liter per person per day. Food was protein bars, 2 per person, barely enough to sustain life. The sanitation facilities, designed for the manufactorum's normal workforce of perhaps 5,000, were overwhelmed by 500,000 refugees. The stench was becoming unbearable. But these discomforts faded into irrelevance when the announcement came. All citizens, prepare for Titan passage. The god machines of Legio Metallica will advance past your position within the next 2 hours. Remain calm. Do not look directly at the Titans. Do not attempt to approach them. The Omnissiah's blessing is upon you. The Emperor protects. Do not look directly at the Titans. The instructions seemed absurd, impossible to follow. How could one not look at a walking god? But a tech priest who was coordinating the shelter's technical systems explained in his mechanical voice that the Titan's void shields generated electromagnetic fields that could damage unprotected optics. Staring at them too long could cause temporary or permanent blindness. The priest also explained that we should cover our ears when the Titans fired their weapons. The sonic pressure alone could rupture eardrums, and the larger weapons could cause more severe damage. Pulmonary hemorrhaging, organ rupture, death by sound. Kale and I tore strips from our clothing, fashioning crude ear protection for ourselves and Miria. Around us, thousands of others did the same, following whispered instructions passed from person to person. We looked like walking wounded, heads wrapped in makeshift bandages, preparing for a war we would not fight, but only endure. The Manufactorum had viewing ports along its eastern wall, massive transparent panels that normally allowed supervisors to observe the production floor from elevated offices. These had been sealed, blast shutters drawn across them to protect against potential weapons discharge. But some refugees had forced open a few shutters, desperate to see what approached, to witness the salvation that might also be their doom. I found myself drawn to one of these viewing ports, compelled by a need to see, to understand, to witness. Kael tried to stop me, but I shook off their hand. If I was going to die, I wanted to see what killed me. I wanted to look my destroyer in the face. The viewing port looked out across the hive's interior, across the vast open space that separated our level from the processional 3 kilometers away. 3 kilometers should have been enough distance to feel safe. In any normal context, 3 kilometers was an enormous buffer. Enough space for entire districts to exist. But Titans operated on a different scale entirely. I saw it first as a shadow, a darkness moving through the smoke and debris that filled the hive's air. Then the shadow resolved into a shape, angular and predatory, and my mind struggled to process what I was seeing because the size was so incomprehensible. The Warhound Scout Titan emerged from the smoke like a vision from ancient myths. 14 meters tall, which is a measurement that means nothing until you see it embodied in metal and purpose. It was shaped vaguely like a human torso mounted on reverse-jointed legs, but the proportions were all wrong, designed by function rather than aesthetics. The cockpit, where the Princeps and Moderati crew interfaced with the machine, was set into what would be the chest. A small cathedral of Gothic architecture, complete with stained glass and flying buttresses. The head, if it could be called that, was a sensor array shaped like a snarling wolf, the symbol of its class. Weapons were mounted on the shoulders where arms would be, massive destructive instruments that dwarfed any vehicle-mounted gun I had ever seen. A plasma blast gun on the left, glowing with barely contained energy. A Vulcan megabolter on the right, a rotary cannon that could fire hundreds of mass-reactive shells per minute. But what struck me most was how it moved. It did not lumber or stomp. It walked with a predatory grace, each step deliberate and fluid, the reverse-jointed legs absorbing the impact of its weight with mechanical precision. This was not just a machine. It was something more, something that possessed a terrible intelligence and purpose. The Titan's void shields were visible as a faint shimmer in the air around it, a barely perceptible distortion like heat haze. These shields could stop incoming fire, deflecting laser and plasma and solid shot, making the Titan nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. But they also affected everything around them, interfering with electronics, generating electromagnetic pulses, causing pain in anyone who came too close. It was 3 kilometers away, but I could feel it. A pressure behind my eyes, a taste like copper on my tongue, a tingling sensation across my skin. The air itself felt different, charged with energies that should not exist in normal space. The warhound's head turned, sensor arrays scanning the levels around it, tracking targets, processing tactical data. For a moment, I swear it looked directly at our viewing port. The red glow of its optical sensors seemed to focus on me. And I felt a moment of pure existential terror. Not fear of death, but fear of being seen and dismissed as irrelevant in a single nanosecond of mechanical calculation. Then it turned away, continuing its advance up the processional. Its weapons were firing constantly, plasma and shells screaming toward enemy positions higher in the hive. Each shot was accompanied by a crack of thunder that I could feel in my chest even at this distance. The muzzle flash from the megabolter was bright enough to leave afterimages on my retinas. The Titan's foot came down on a building in its path. Not a direct stomp, not deliberate destruction, but simply placing its foot where it needed to go to take its next step. The building, a hab block that probably housed 10,000 people, did not explode. It compressed. The entire structure pancaked downward, floors collapsing onto each other in sequence. The whole thing settling into a pile of rubble in the space of 3 seconds. I could see people falling from the upper floors, tiny figures tumbling through the air. Too far away to hear their screams, too small to see their faces. Just dark specks against the gray of the hive's interior, there and then gone. The warhound walked on, unaware or uncaring. Its mission was to advance, to close with the enemy, to purge the chaos corruption. The people in that building were not enemies. They were not even obstacles. They were simply too small to register in the Titan's tactical calculations. Behind the warhound, a second one appeared, identical in form but bearing different heraldry, different kill markings painted on its carapace. This one walked a parallel path, perhaps 200 meters to the left of the first. Together they advanced like hunting hounds, their name made manifest in their movement. The second warhound passed closer to a power relay station, one of the massive transformer complexes that distributed electricity throughout the hive. Its void shields brushed against the station's containment field, 2 incompatible technologies interacting catastrophically. The explosion was not fire or heat. It was pure electrical discharge, a lightning storm contained in a space the size of a city block. Arcs of electricity leaped between buildings, grounding themselves through any conductive path available. I saw people on elevated walkways near the station simply ignite, their bodies serving as conduits for energies meant to power entire districts. The lights throughout our section flickered and died. Backup systems kicked in, failed, kicked in again. In the darkness between cycles, I heard the screams of hundreds of thousands of people convinced that this was the end, that we would all die in the dark. "Children," Kale said behind me. I turned to see them holding Miria, who had followed me to the viewing port despite our instructions to stay away. "You are bringing our daughter to watch people die. She should see," I said, surprising myself with the words. "She should know what salvation looks like in the Imperium, what it costs." Kael stared at me with an expression I could not read, then nodded slowly. We watched together as the Reavers appeared. These were larger, 22 meters tall, and where the Warhounds were scouts, fast and agile, the Reavers were battle titans designed for sustained combat. They walked with heavier steps, each footfall sending shockwaves through the hive structure that I could feel even at our distance. The Reavers were more heavily armed, bristling with weapons batteries. I could see turbo laser destructors on their arms, weapons capable of cutting through fortified bunkers. Apocalypse missile launchers on their shoulders, capable of destroying entire companies of enemy forces with a single salvo. And on their carapaces, additional weapons whose purpose I could not identify, but whose destructive potential was evident in their Baroque Gothic design. One Reaver's foot came down directly on the processional itself, on the reinforced roadway designed to carry heavy traffic. The rockcrete shattered like glass under the Titan's weight, the road surface collapsing inward, creating a crater 15 meters deep. Service tunnels and maintenance passages beneath the road were exposed, then crushed as the Titan's foot settled into the crater it had created. How many people had been in those tunnels? Maintenance crews, refugees taking lower routes, perhaps smugglers and underhive dwellers using the chaos to move through restricted areas. I would never know. They were simply erased, pressed into the bedrock by forces beyond human resistance. The second Reaver walked closer to the hab levels, its path taking it within a kilometer of our position. I could see it more clearly now, could make out details that defied belief. Every surface was covered in Gothic architecture, flying buttresses and gargoyles and saints carved into armor plates. Prayer scrolls hung from weapon mounts, each one dozens of meters long, covered in litanies in languages I did not know. The whole machine was a cathedral mobile, a temple to the Omnissiah and the God Emperor, a fusion of faith and destruction. And it was beautiful. That was the most disturbing realization. Despite the horror it represented, despite the death it caused with each step, it was magnificent. The craftsmanship, the artistry, the sheer audacity of creating something so vast and powerful and ornate. I understood in that moment why the Mechanicus worshipped these machines, why they called them God machines. They inspired awe in a way that transcended mere fear. Miria was crying, but she could not look away. "Papa," she whispered, "why is it so angry?" "It is not angry, little one," I said. "It is not anything. It is a machine, directed by a crew, serving a purpose. It has no emotions." But even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. The Titans were said to have machine spirits, artificial intelligences, or perhaps something more. Remnants of the consciousness of previous crew members who had died while interfaced with the machine. These spirits were moody, temperamental, requiring careful handling by their princeps. They could be wrathful or serene, aggressive or cautious. Perhaps Miria was right. Perhaps the Titans were angry. Angry at the corruption of chaos. Angry at being awakened from their slumber in the Titan hangar. Angry at the universe for requiring their constant vigilance and violence. The Reavers fired their weapons as they advanced, targeting the corrupted cathedral high above us. I watched as turbo laser beams, each one meters wide, lanced upward through the hive's interior. They struck buildings in their path, punching through them like paper. The superheated beams leaving perfectly circular holes through which I could see daylight from levels beyond. Then the beams reached their targets, striking the chaos stronghold with the fury of miniature suns. Entire sections of the upper hive simply vanished, vaporized by the concentrated energy. The blast wave that followed moments later was visible as a rippling distortion in the air, spreading outward and downward, shattering windows and knocking down smaller structures. The sonic pressure reached us seconds later. Despite our improvised ear protection, the sound was overwhelming. Not loud in the traditional sense, but a physical force that pressed against us, that resonated in our bones and organs. I felt my lungs compress, felt my heart skip beats, felt blood vessels in my nose rupture. Around me, refugees were collapsing. The elderly and the very young suffered worst, their frailer bodies unable to withstand the pressure. Medicaid teams rushed to help, but there were too many casualties, too few medics. People were dying from the mere sound of the Titans' weapons, their bodies damaged by physics they could not resist. Kael had pulled Miria down, covering her body with their own, trying to shield her from the worst of it. I crouched beside them, adding my bulk to the protection, feeling utterly helpless. We were like insects in a storm, our survival a matter of chance rather than action. The weapon's fire continued for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The Reavers unleashed a sustained barrage, pouring destruction into the upper levels with mechanical precision. Each shot was calculated, targeted, intended to maximize damage to enemy positions while theoretically minimizing collateral casualties to Imperial citizens. But theory and practice diverged in the reality of urban combat. Shots that missed their targets by even a few meters struck inhabited buildings. Backblast from the weapons set fire to structures behind the Titans. Debris from destroyed enemy positions fell onto the levels below, crushing whatever they landed on. And through it all, the Reavers walked forward, ascending the processional, climbing toward their objective with inexorable determination. Then the Warlord appeared, and I understood that everything I had seen before was merely preamble. The Warlord Battle Titan stood 33 meters tall, dominating the hive's interior like a mountain made mobile. It was not simply larger than the Reavers. It was different in kind, a manifestation of the Imperium's might that transcended mere scale. The hull was so massive that entire buildings would fit inside it. The weapons were so numerous and varied that I could not count them all. The head was a fortress unto itself, a Gothic cathedral, complete with spires and stained glass windows, housing the command crew and the Titan's most sacred systems. The body was layered armor, meters thick, covered in defensive systems and religious iconography. The arms mounted weapons that could level city blocks with single shots. The carapace bristled with additional armaments, point defense systems, and sensor arrays. But what struck me most was the sense of presence. The Warlord did not just walk through our world, it dominated it. The air pressure changed as it moved, displaced by its sheer bulk. The electromagnetic field it generated was so powerful that I could feel it in my teeth, in the metal fixtures of my clothing, in the data slate I carried. The Warlord's first step onto our level shook the entire Manufactorum. Not a tremor, not a vibration, but a genuine earthquake. Support columns cracked. Ceiling panels fell. Whole sections of the floor buckled and heaved. Refugees screamed and ran, though there was nowhere to run to. The PDF fired their weapons into the air, trying to maintain order through intimidation. But their authority meant nothing against the primal terror of the earth itself betraying us. The Warlord fired its main weapon, a Bellicosa volcano cannon mounted on its right arm. The weapon was designed to destroy enemy Titans and fortifications, firing a beam of superheated matter that could melt through any armor. When it discharged, the sound was like the universe itself tearing. The beam lanced upward, striking the corrupted cathedral in the upper hive. I watched as kilometers of hive structure simply ceased to exist, matter converted to plasma and gas. The cathedral, the focus of so much chaos, corruption, exploded in a blast of warp energy and conventional physics mixing catastrophically. The blast wave, when it reached us, was apocalyptic. The viewing port shattered despite being armored. The blast shutters tore from their mountings. Refugees near the windows were shredded by flying glass and metal. I felt myself lifted off my feet, thrown backward by the pressure wave, tumbling through the air in a tangle with Kale and Miria. We landed in a heap 20 meters from where we had been standing. Around us was carnage, bodies torn apart by debris, people crushed under fallen equipment, the wounded and dying lying in pools of blood that spread across the Manufactorum floor. I checked Miria first, running my hands over her small body, searching for injuries. She was bruised, bleeding from a cut on her forehead, but alive, conscious. Kyle had taken the worst of our impact, their left arm bent at an unnatural angle, broken, but alive. Both alive. "We are leaving," I said. I did not ask, did not discuss. I picked up Miria, helped Kale to their feet, and we ran for the exits. Behind us, the Warlord continued its advance, firing its weapons with methodical regularity. Each shot ended worlds. Each step reshaped the landscape. It was salvation made manifest in metal and fury. And somewhere above it, still ascending, came the Imperator, the largest Titan, the ultimate god machine, 55 meters of absolute power. I had not yet seen it directly, but I could feel it coming. The vibrations were different, heavier, each footfall like a hammer striking the planet's core. We fled into the darkness of the lower levels, joining the rivers of refugees, evacuating ahead of the Titan's advance. And I realized that the Emperor's protection was not a shield, but a sword. And that sword cut down the faithful and the corrupt with equal indifference. Because to gods of metal, all humans look the same. Too small to matter, too brief to remember. Just biological components in the vast machine of the Imperium. Acceptable losses in the mathematics of survival. The evacuation had broken down completely. What had been an organized descent through designated routes had devolved into pure survival instinct. Thousands of people flooding through any corridor or stairwell that led downward. The PDF checkpoints were abandoned, the troopers either fled or dead. We were on our own, part of a human avalanche cascading into the hive's depths. Kale's broken arm was a liability we could not afford. Every jostle, every impact with the crowd sent spasms of pain across their face. But they gritted their teeth and kept moving, cradling the injured limb against their chest while using the other to guide us through the chaos. Miria I carried on my back, her arms wrapped around my neck, her weight becoming heavier with each level we descended. My legs burned, my lungs screamed for air in the hot, stale atmosphere. But I did not stop. Could not stop. Behind us, above us, the Titans continued their advance. And every moment we delayed was a moment closer to being caught in their passage. We had descended 20 levels when the first real casualties of the Titans' proximity began to manifest. Not from direct weapons fire or crushing footfalls, but from the cascade of failures their presence triggered in the hive's ancient systems. A power conduit above us exploded, not from damage but from overload as the Titan's void shields disrupted the electrical grid. Molten metal rained down, and I watched a man ahead of us simply ignite, his body fat burning like candle wax. His screams lasted for seconds that felt eternal before he collapsed, and the crowd flowed over him. We pressed against a wall, waiting for the conduit to burn itself out, for the immediate danger to pass. Around us, others were not so cautious or lucky. A woman tried to run past the burning debris and caught fire herself. A child, separated from parents, stood frozen in terror until someone grabbed them and pulled them to safety. The air was becoming toxic, filled with the smoke of burning insulation and human flesh. My augmented respirator, a simple filtration mask I wore for my administratum work, was inadequate. I could feel my lungs laboring, could taste chemicals with every breath. Miria was coughing against my back, her small body shaking. Kale pointed to a side corridor, less crowded, possibly leading to alternate routes down. We pushed toward it, fighting against the flow of the crowd, earning curses and shoves from those we displaced. But we made it, tumbling into the relative emptiness of a maintenance passage. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 people abreast, lit only by flickering emergency lumens. But it was empty, and the air was marginally better. We ran, our footsteps echoing off metal walls, descending a steep ramp that curved deeper into the hive's structure. We passed maintenance alcoves and service junctions, areas normally occupied by work crews keeping the hive's systems functional. They were all abandoned now, tools left scattered, work half completed. Even the servitors that normally toiled endlessly in these spaces were gone, either destroyed by the chaos or shut down by system failures. The vibrations were constant here, transmitted through the metal of the passage itself. I could feel each Titan footfall as a pulse of sensation through my boots, up my legs, into my spine. The rhythm was irregular now as multiple Titans moved at different paces, their steps overlapping into a continuous earthquake. We emerged from the maintenance passage into what had been a commercial district, shops and services catering to the workers of the lower manufactorums. Now, it was a war zone. Buildings had collapsed, not from direct damage but from structural failures, as the foundations shifted under the Titan's weight. Fires burned in several locations. the automatic suppression systems offline, and it was packed with refugees. Hundreds of thousands of people had sought shelter here, believing they were far enough from the processional to be safe. They huddled in doorways, clustered in open squares, pressed against walls. Their faces showed the same exhaustion and terror I felt in my own body. A PDF officer was trying to organize them, shouting orders that no one followed. When he saw us emerging from the maintenance passage, he grabbed my arm. "You," he barked. "Where does that passage lead? Can it handle mass traffic?" "It is too narrow," I replied. "Single file, perhaps two abreast. You cannot evacuate this many people through it." He cursed, released me, turned to shout more futile orders at the crowd. I found a space against a wall where we could rest, at least for a moment. Kale slumped beside me, their face pale with pain and blood loss. The broken arm was swelling badly, the skin discolored. Without proper medical treatment, infection would set in. But the Medicae stations were overwhelmed or destroyed. KL would have to endure. Miria climbed down from my back, her legs unsteady. She looked up at me with eyes too old for her face, eyes that had seen things no child should witness. "Papa," she said quietly, "are we going to die?" The question deserved honesty. "No," I said. It was a promise I had no right to make, no power to fulfill. But she was 7 years old and terrified, and I would lie to her if it brought even a moment of comfort. A woman nearby overheard us. She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Survive? We are all dead already. We just have not stopped moving yet." Others took up the sentiment, a wave of despair spreading through the crowd. What was the point of running? The Titans were above us, around us, their passage reshaping the hive itself. Even if we escaped direct destruction, the cascading failures would kill us. Starvation when the supply lines collapsed, dehydration when the water systems failed, suffocation when the ventilation gave out. A man stood on a pile of rubble, raising his voice to address the crowd. "The Emperor has abandoned us," he shouted. "We are sacrifices to his indifference, lambs to be slaughtered so the rest of the Imperium can pretend it is safe." Heresy. Open heresy, spoken in public. A week ago, such words would have brought the Arbites down on the speaker. Harsh justice for blasphemy. Now, people nodded in agreement. The thin veneer of faith was cracking under the weight of reality. A tech priest appeared, his red robes filthy with ash and oil. He confronted the heretic, his mechanical voice cutting through the crowd noise. "The Emperor has not abandoned you," the tech priest declared. "The Omnissiah's tools are being employed for the salvation of billions. Your suffering is regrettable but necessary. The calculations are clear. 18 million casualties to save 23 billion. The mathematics of faith. 18 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. That was the estimated death toll from the Titan deployment alone, not counting the chaos incursion that preceded it. 18 million people reduced to a number, a calculation, an acceptable loss. The heretic on the rubble pile laughed again. "Hear that? 18 million acceptable losses. Which of you feels acceptable? Which of you is ready to die so the equation balances?" The crowd murmured, some in agreement, some in anger at the heretic's blasphemy. The PDF officer drew his pistol, aimed it at the speaker. "You will be silent, or I will silence you." "Go ahead," the heretic said. "Add one more to the count." "What difference does it make?" The officer hesitated, then lowered his weapon. Perhaps he was too tired to enforce order. Perhaps he secretly agreed. Perhaps he simply recognized the futility of shooting one man when millions were already dead. The tech priest turned away from the heretic, addressing the crowd instead. "The Titans will pass. The enemy will be purged. Those who survive will rebuild. This is the way of the Imperium. Endurance through faith." He began to walk away, but I found myself moving to intercept him. My body acted before my mind could question the wisdom of confronting a tech priest. 18 million, I said. You speak of it as if it were nothing. As if we were nothing. The tech priest's augmetic eyes whirred as they focused on me. You are not nothing. You are components of the Imperium, serving your purpose. The Titans saved 23 billion. The math is undeniable. We are people, I said, my voice rising despite my attempts to control it. Not components, not numbers. People with names and families and lives that matter beyond your calculations. The tech priest tilted his head, a curiously human gesture from something that was more machine than man. You are correct. You are people. But the Imperium cannot function on individual sentiment. It must operate on aggregate mathematics. 1 person is a tragedy. 1 million is a statistic. 18 million is an acceptable parameter for the salvation of billions. And if you were one of the 18 million, would you still find it acceptable? The question hung in the air between us. The tech priest was silent for a moment, his augmetic systems processing. Then he replied, his mechanical voice devoid of emotion. If my death served the Omnissiah's purpose, I would embrace it, as would any true servant of the machine god. Your attachment to individual existence is the weakness of flesh. He walked away, leaving me with no answer, no comfort, no resolution, just the cold mathematics of survival. I returned to Kale and Miria. My spouse looked at me with an expression of sad understanding. You are losing your faith, they said quietly. I do not know what I am losing, I replied. Perhaps just my illusions. The ground shook with renewed violence. The Titans were closer, much closer. The warlord was passing almost directly above us now, perhaps a kilometer away vertically. The sensation was beyond description. It was like being inside a drum as it was struck, like feeling the planet itself flinch from the impact of each footfall. The building we sheltered against began to crack. Hairline fractures appeared in the walls, spreading like lightning across the surface. Chunks of rockcrete fell from the ceiling. The PDF officer began screaming orders to evacuate, to move, to get away from the structure before it collapsed. But where could we go? Every building around us was suffering similar damage. The entire district was coming apart, not from direct attack, but from sympathetic failure, as the hive's structure could no longer support its own weight under the stresses the Titans imposed. A man near us made the decision to run, dashing out into the open square toward a building that looked more stable. He made it halfway before the ground beneath him opened up. Not a sinkhole, but a sudden collapse of the level below us, weakened by the Titan's passage. He fell into the darkness, his scream cutting off with terrible abruptness. Others followed him into the chasm before they could stop themselves, momentum carrying them over the edge. I grabbed Miria, pulled her away from the growing hole. Kale backed against the wall, their good arm outstretched for balance. The hole expanded, swallowing a dozen people, then a score, then hundreds as the entire center of the square collapsed. The sound was like the world ending, a grinding roar of breaking stone and twisting metal. And then, through the hole, I could see into the level below. And there, visible through the hive's interior space, I saw the Imperator. It was impossible to process. My brain simply refused to accept what my eyes reported. 55 meters tall. The measurement was meaningless. It was a walking fortress, a mobile hive unto itself. The legs alone were the size of apartment blocks. The torso could have housed thousands of people. The weapons were beyond comprehension, guns that could destroy cities, missile batteries that could level mountains. The Imperator's head was a cathedral complex, complete with spires that reached toward the heavens, stained glass windows that glowed with internal light, flying buttresses and gargoyles and prayer bells. The hull was so heavily armored that it seemed to be carved from a single piece of metal, every surface covered in relief sculptures of saints and battles, in inscriptions of holy text in languages dead for millennia. But what struck me most was the sense of will. This was not just a machine. It was not even just a god machine. It was something that possessed agency, that made choices, that imposed its presence on reality through sheer force of existence. The Imperator did not walk through our world. It redefined what world meant. Its void shields were visible as a shimmering aurora, colors that should not exist playing across the field. The electromagnetic effects were catastrophic, even at this distance. Every piece of electronic equipment in the district died simultaneously. The lumens exploded. Data slates sparked and melted. Augmetics failed. People with bionic hearts or lungs or organs simply collapsing as their mechanical components ceased functioning. Kale gasped, their hand going to their chest. The lung augmetic, the enhancement they had received for their water reclamation work, allowing them to hold their breath longer, to work in areas with poor air quality. It was failing, burned out by the Imperator's void shield interaction. "No," I said, grabbing them as they began to fall. "No, no, no." But there was nothing I could do. Kale's lungs, accustomed to the augmetic's assistance, could not function properly without it. They gasped for air, their face turning blue, drowning on dry land. Miria was screaming. Others around us were suffering similar failures, dozens of people collapsing as their augmetics died. The Medicaid teams were trying to help, but there were too many, far too many. I held Kale, trying to force air into their lungs, attempting crude resuscitation that I barely understood. But it was not working. Their eyes were wide with panic and pain, their body convulsing. "Stay with me," I begged. "Kyle, stay with me. For Miria. For us. Stay." They tried to speak, their lips forming words without sound. I leaned close, pressing my ear to their mouth. "Protect her," they whispered. "Promise me." "I promise," I said. Kale's eyes found Miria, held her gaze for a long moment. Then the light faded from them, and they went, still. I do not remember the next minutes. I have no memory of them beyond fragmented images. Miria's face, her mouth open in a silent scream. The Medicaid team moving on, unable to help, too many others still living who needed their attention. The weight of Kale's body in my arms, heavier in death than in life. The Imperator continued its advance, unaware and uncaring. Its weapons fired, the sound like continents breaking. Each shot was precise, calculated, targeted at the corrupted cathedral in the upper hive. The enemy was being destroyed with absolute efficiency. This was salvation. This was the Emperor's protection. This was the price of survival in a galaxy at war. I laid Kale's body down gently, closed their eyes with my hand. There was no time for proper rites, no opportunity for grief. The building around us was still failing, and we had to move or die. I picked up Miria, who had gone into shock, her body limp, her eyes staring at nothing. I began to walk, joining the flow of refugees, still trying to escape, still trying to descend to safety. Behind us, the Imperator's foot came down on the level we had just abandoned. The entire district, with all its buildings and streets and squares, with all the thousands of refugees who had not moved fast enough, simply ceased to exist. Compressed into rubble and dust, erased from reality by forces beyond human resistance. I did not look back. I could not afford to. I had made a promise to Kale, and I would keep it. I would protect Miria. I would survive. Even if survival meant walking through hell. Even if it meant abandoning the dead without ceremony. Even if it meant losing every shred of faith and hope and human decency. We descended into darkness. And above us the Titans walked. And the Emperor's salvation continued its terrible work. We descended 15 more levels before I allowed myself to stop. My legs were shaking, threatening to collapse beneath me. Miria's weight, once negligible, now felt like carrying lead. My back screamed with every step, muscles torn from the sustained exertion. But more than physical exhaustion, it was the knowledge that Kale was gone, truly gone, that threatened to break me. I found a corner in what appeared to be an ancient storage facility, long abandoned and now repurposed as yet another refugee shelter. Thousands huddled in the darkness, lit only by chemical glow sticks that cast everything in sickly green light. The air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and despair. I set Miria down carefully. She had not spoken since Kale died, had not moved except when I moved her, had not responded to my attempts at comfort. She sat where I placed her, staring at nothing, her small hands folded in her lap. A Medicae servitor wandered past, its human components long since rotted away and replaced with mechanical approximations. I flagged it down, desperate for help. "The child," I said, pointing to Miria. "She is in shock. She needs treatment." The servitor's optical sensors focused on her, ran a diagnostic scan. "Psychological trauma detected," it intoned in its mechanical voice. "No physical injuries requiring immediate intervention. Current triage protocols prioritize physical casualties. Recommended treatment, time, and prayer." It moved on before I could protest, seeking those with injuries it could actually treat. I wanted to rage at it, to demand it help my daughter. But what was the point? It was a machine following programming, no more capable of compassion than the titans crushing the levels above us. I sat beside Miria, pulled her close. She did not resist, but also did not respond, her body limp against mine. I whispered to her, meaningless comfort, promises I could not keep, prayers to an emperor I was no longer certain cared. Around us, other refugees dealt with their own traumas. A woman keened over a dead child, rocking back and forth in an endless rhythm of grief. A man stared at the stump where his arm had been, severed in a collapse. The wound cauterized by superheated metal, shock preventing him from fully processing his loss. An elderly couple sat together, holding hands, waiting for death with quiet dignity. This was the reality the official reports would never document. The administratum would record 18 million casualties as a single number in a data file. They would note the successful deployment of Titan assets, the elimination of chaos forces, the preservation of the hive. But they would never record this moment, these specific people, this particular texture of suffering. The vibrations intensified. The Titans were still advancing, still climbing toward the corrupted cathedral. But they were closer now, much closer. The warlord had passed, but the Imperator was approaching our level. Its path, taking it within perhaps 500 meters of our position. 500 meters. It should have been enough distance. It was not. The first sign of the Imperator's passage was the sound, a bass rumble so deep it was almost subsonic, felt rather than heard. It resonated in my chest cavity, made my heart skip beats, caused my vision to blur. Around me, others were experiencing the same effects. People clutched their chests, fell to their knees, vomited from the sheer physical disruption. Then came the heat. The Imperator's plasma reactor, the massive fusion core that powered the God Machine, radiated thermal energy like a miniature sun. Even at distance, even through layers of hive structure, we could feel it. The temperature in our shelter rose 10 degrees in as many seconds, then 20, then 30. People began stripping off clothing, desperate for any relief from the heat. Children were crying, their bodies unable to regulate temperature effectively. The elderly were dying, heat stroke claiming them in minutes. I held Miria, feeling her skin burning against mine, and there was nothing I could do but endure. The Imperator's footfall came like the fist of an angry god. The entire level tilted. Not a tremor, not a shake, but an actual change in the angle of the floor. Support columns that had held for 6,000 years cracked with reports like gunfire. The ceiling, hundreds of meters above us, began to sag visibly. Structural failure imminent. A tech priest somewhere was broadcasting. All citizens evacuate immediately. Repeat, structural failure imminent. But evacuate to where? The stairwells were packed beyond capacity. The corridors were mazes of collapsed sections and impassable debris. We were trapped, and the ceiling was coming down. I grabbed Miria, hauled her to her feet. "We have to move," I said, not knowing if she could hear me, if she understood. "We have to run." I pulled her toward the exit, fighting against the tide of people with the same idea. The crowd was a living thing, panicked and violent, trampling the weak in its desperation to escape. I held Miria above the worst of it, using my body as a shield, taking elbows and fists and kicks without complaint. We made it into a corridor just as the storage facility's ceiling collapsed. The sound was beyond description, a roar of failing stone and twisting metal that obliterated all other noise. The pressure wave that followed knocked me off my feet, sent us tumbling down the corridor in a tangle of limbs. When I could see again through the dust, I looked back. The storage facility was gone, compressed into a space a third of its previous height. Everyone who had not escaped was dead, crushed instantly or trapped in pockets to die slowly of suffocation or thirst. Tens of thousands dead, perhaps 100,000. I could not know, would never know. They were just gone, erased, their lives ending without warning or ceremony. And the Imperator walked on, unaware that it had just killed more people with a single step than lived in some entire planetary populations. Miria was bleeding from a cut on her scalp, fresh blood mixing with the dried blood from earlier injuries. But her eyes were focused now, shock temporarily overridden by survival instinct. She clung to me as I stood. As we continued our descent into whatever passed for safety in this hell, we emerged into what had once been a residential district, mid-level habs for skilled workers and minor administrators. The buildings were older than those above, their architecture from an earlier era when the Imperium had still maintained aesthetic standards. But age had made them sturdy, and they had survived where newer construction had failed. The processional was visible from here, or rather, the ruins of it were visible. The Titans had carved a canyon through the hive, a chasm 500 meters wide and hundreds of levels deep. I could see down into it, down through the layers of hive structure, like looking at a cross-section of history. And at the bottom of that canyon, I could see the Imperator's footprints, craters 20 meters deep, filled with rubble and the crushed remains of everything that had been in the way. Each footprint was a tomb for thousands. The Imperator itself was visible in the distance, climbing upward, its weapons firing in continuous barrages. The corrupted cathedral was burning now, warp fire and conventional flames mixing into a conflagration that lit the entire upper hive. Daemons were dying, banished back to the Imperium by the sheer, overwhelming force of the Titans' assault. We were winning. Humanity was triumphing over chaos. The Emperor's will was being done, and the cost was beyond counting. A man stood at the edge of the canyon, staring down into it. I recognized him from the earlier shelter, the one who had spoken heresy. He turned as we approached, his face empty of emotion. "Do you see it now?" he asked, not really speaking to me but to the universe at large. "This is what we are to them. Ground, terrain, acceptable losses in a war we did not start and cannot win. The Imperium will rebuild," I said, repeating the platitudes I had been taught. He laughed, the sound hollow. "Yes, we will survive. Some of us. Enough to breed a new generation to be fed into the machine. And when the next war comes, the next incursion, the next threat to the Imperium, they will deploy the Titans again, and more millions will die. and the survivors will say the same things you are saying now." He stepped closer to the edge, his toes hanging over the drop. "It would be so easy," he said. "Just one step. No more waiting for a ceiling to collapse, or a building to burn, or a void shield to stop my heart. Just choice. The last freedom we have." I should have stopped him. Should have said something about the Emperor's plan, about duty, about faith. But I found I had no words. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps the only choice left to us was how we died. He stepped off the edge. I watched him fall, his body tumbling through the air, disappearing into the smoke and darkness below. Miria turned her face away, pressed it against my chest. We moved away from the canyon, back into the relative safety of the intact Habs. I found an abandoned dwelling, its door hanging open, the occupants either dead or fled. Inside was the detritus of a life interrupted, half-eaten meals on the table, clothes laid out for the next day, a child's toys scattered across the floor. I laid Miria on the bed in the sleeping chamber, covered her with a blanket. She was shivering, despite the heat, her body's response to trauma. I sat beside her, stroking her hair, trying to provide comfort I did not feel. "Papa," she said, her first word since Kale died. The question I had been dreading. I could lie, could tell her Kale was somewhere safe, would meet us later, but she had seen too much, knew too much. Lies would only make it worse. "Mama is gone," I said quietly. The angel's shields hurt Mama's lungs. Mama could not breathe anymore. "Did Mama die?" Miria asked, her voice very small. "Yes, little one. Mama died." She was silent for a long moment, processing this. How did I answer that? How did I explain that salvation and destruction were the same thing in the Imperium? That the Emperor's protection came with a price counted in millions of lives? "The angels are fighting the bad people," I said slowly. "The very bad people who hurt the hive. But the angels are so big, and we are so small, that sometimes they hurt good people too. Not because they want to, but because they cannot see us." Miria considered this. "Are we too small for the Emperor to see us too?" The question pierced me. I wanted to say no, wanted to assure her that the Emperor saw and loved every soul in his Imperium. But I found I no longer believed it. Or perhaps I believed he saw us but did not care, could not afford to care. Because if he grieved for every death, every loss, every tragedy, he would be paralyzed by sorrow. "The Emperor sees us," I said carefully. "But he has the whole Imperium to watch over. Billions and billions of people. So sometimes, he has to make hard choices. He has to let some people die so that more people can live. That is not fair." Miria said. "No," I agreed. "It is not fair. But life in the Imperium is not fair. It is just necessary." She turned away from me, curling into a ball. I lay beside her, holding her, and we tried to sleep despite the ongoing thunder of the Titan's passage, despite the screams from outside, despite the knowledge that Kale was gone and we were alone. I must have dozed, because I woke to silence. Not true silence, but the absence of the Titan's footfalls. The battle was over. The enemy had been defeated. I went to the window, looked out over the hive. Dawn was coming, the massive lumens that simulated daylight beginning to brighten. In their light, I could see the true extent of the devastation. The canyon the Titans had carved was a scar across the hive's face, kilometers long and catastrophically deep. Entire districts had ceased to exist. Buildings that had stood for millennia were rubble. The death toll would be, I could not even imagine. 18 million had been the estimate before the Imperator's passage. The final count would be higher, much higher. But the corrupted cathedral was gone, destroyed so completely that not even debris remained. The word-bearers were dead or routed. The demon incursion had been banished. The hive was saved. This was victory. This was what the Emperor's protection looked like. A voxcaster somewhere crackled to life, broadcasting an official message: "Citizens of Hive Secundus, the enemy has been defeated. The Titans of Legio Metallica have successfully purged the chaos corruption. The Hive is secure. Begin damage assessment and recovery operations. The Emperor protects." I laughed. A sound that bordered on hysteria. The Emperor protects. He had protected us by killing us. He had saved us by destroying everything we had. Miria appeared beside me, drawn by the sound of my laughter, or perhaps by the voxcast. She looked out at the devastation, her young mind trying to comprehend the scale of what had been done to our world. "Did we win, Papa?" she asked. I looked down at her, at my daughter who had lost her mother, her home, her innocence, all in the span of days. I thought about Kale, dead from technology that was supposed to help them. I thought about the millions crushed under the Titan's feet, the millions who would die in the coming weeks from disease and starvation and despair. "Yes," I said. And in saying it, I felt something break inside me. Some final thread of faith or hope or belief in the Imperium's fundamental benevolence. We had won, but the victory looked an awful lot like defeat. Outside, recovery crews were beginning their work. Servitors and work teams, PDF soldiers and administratum assessors, all moving into the ruins to count the dead and salvage what could be saved. And somewhere above us, the Titans were returning to their hangar, to be put into stasis until the next time they were needed, until the next enemy threatened, and the next city would be saved, and the next millions would die. The Emperor protects. I believed this still, in a way, but I understood now what it meant. It meant survival at any cost. It meant mathematics without morality. It meant that individual lives were currency to be spent in pursuit of the species' continuation. And we, the survivors, were the ones who had to live with that knowledge, who had to rebuild on the graves of those who had been deemed acceptable losses, who had to tell ourselves that their deaths meant something, served some purpose, because the alternative was admitting that they had died for nothing more than being in the way. I held Miria close, and we watched the sun rise over a broken world. And I wondered if this was what faith meant in the Imperium. Not belief in benevolence, or justice, or love, but simply endurance. The will to continue despite everything. Because the alternative was to let the darkness win. And darkness, at least, was honest about what it wanted. 2 days passed before the recovery operations reached our level. 2 days of living in an abandoned hab with no power, no water, no food beyond what I had carried in our emergency pack. 2 days of watching Miria retreat further into herself, speaking only when absolutely necessary, eating only when I forced her to. The official casualty reports began filtering through the voxcasters on the 3rd day. The numbers were incomprehensible, almost abstract in their magnitude. 22 million confirmed dead. Another 15 million missing, presumed dead under rubble or in collapsed sections that would never be excavated. 8 million injured, of whom perhaps half would survive with the limited medical resources available. 37 million casualties total, from a hive population of 40 billion, less than 1%. Statistically insignificant. Acceptable losses. The word-bearers' forces had numbered approximately 200 traitor Astartes, supported by perhaps 50,000 cultists and an unknown number of demons. We had killed all of them. Every single one purged by bolter and blade and titan weapon. The equation was clear. 37 million Imperial lives traded for 250,000 enemy forces. Efficient. Effective. Victory. I returned to the canyon's edge often during those first days, drawn by a morbid need to witness the scale of what had been done. The Titan's path was being documented by tech priests and administratum assessors, turning tragedy into data, suffering into statistics. I watched them work, measuring the depth of footprints, calculating structural damage, assessing the cost of rebuilding. They moved with clinical detachment, utterly unmoved by the occasional body they uncovered in the rubble. Another corpse was just another data point, another entry in their ledgers. On the fourth day, I received a summons. All surviving administratum personnel were to report to emergency coordination centers for reassignment. The Imperium's machinery continued regardless of catastrophe, and clerks were needed to document the disaster, process the dead, organize the survivors. I left Miria with an elderly woman who had lost her own grandchildren in the collapse. She promised to watch over her, to keep her safe. I had no choice but to trust her. The summons was not optional. The coordination center had been established in a relatively undamaged government building, one of the few structures reinforced enough to withstand the Titan's passage without catastrophic failure. Inside, it was chaos of a different sort. Hundreds of clerks and administrators, all trying to impose order on disorder, to make sense of the senseless. I was assigned to casualty documentation. My task was simple: process reports of the dead, confirm identities where possible, update the registry of Imperial citizens to reflect their loss. It was the same work I had done before, just with different numbers, different names. Except these names meant something. Each entry was a person I might have passed in a corridor, might have shared a transit lift with, might have nodded to in the morning, and now they were dead, reduced to a line in a database. Citizen 4732886329981. Status: deceased. Cause: structural collapse. Related asset: Titan deployment. Tertium incursion. Citizen 9115772488867. Status: deceased. Cause: thermal injuries. Related asset: Titan deployment. Tertium incursion. Citizen 238844991175. Status: deceased. Cause: cardiac failure secondary to electromagnetic pulse. Related asset: Titan deployment. Tertium incursion. The entries blurred together after the first 1,000. After the first 10,000, I stopped seeing them as people at all. They became numbers, data to be processed, information to be filed. It was the only way to endure it. On the 7th day of documentation work, I came across an entry that stopped me cold. Citizen 8899223366441100. Cause: respiratory failure, secondary to augmetic malfunction. Related asset: Titan deployment. Tertium incursion. My spouse, Michael, reduced to a number and a cause of death. I stared at the entry, my hands shaking, and I realized I had to complete it. Had to officially record the death of the person I loved. Date of death, location of death, next of kin, disposition of remains. Unknown, unknown. Aaron Vash, spouse. Miria Vash, daughter. Unknown, unknown. We had left Kale's body in the collapsed district. It was buried under tons of rubble, would never be recovered. There would be no funeral, no proper rites, no grave to visit. Just an entry in a database confirming that they had existed and then ceased to exist. I completed the form, submitted it, and moved on to the next entry. What else could I do? The work had to be done. The dead had to be counted. The Imperium demanded its accounting. During my meal break, I encountered a tech priest in the facility's refectory. He was reviewing casualty data on a data slate, his augmetic fingers moving rapidly across the screen. I recognized him as one of the tech priests who had been at the earlier shelter. the one who had spoken of acceptable parameters. I approached him, driven by a need I could not fully articulate. "The casualties," I said without preamble. 37 million. Was this truly acceptable? The tech priest's augmetic eyes focused on me, recognition flickering in their mechanical depths. "Ah, the component who questioned the mathematics. You survived." "My spouse did not," I said. "My child lost her mother." "For the survival of 23 billion, the tech priest replied without hesitation. "The calculation is straightforward. Without Titan intervention, chaos forces would have corrupted the entire hive within 72 hours. Projected casualties, 23 billion. Actual casualties, 37 million. Net lives saved, 22.963 billion. You speak of lives as if they were numbers on a ledger. You speak of lives as if they were numbers on a ledger. They are numbers on a ledger. The Imperium cannot function on sentiment. Resources are finite. Choices must be made. The Titans were the most efficient solution to the threat." "Efficient," I repeated. "My spouse died efficiently. Thousands of children were crushed efficiently. Entire generations erased efficiently." The tech priest tilted his head, that curious gesture of contemplation. "You are angry. This is understandable. Organic components often experience emotional responses to loss. But your anger does not change the mathematics. The Titans saved more lives than they cost. And if there had been another way, if we had evacuated the hive before deploying the Titans, impossible. Evacuation of 40 billion citizens would require months and transportation assets the Imperium does not possess. The chaos corruption was spreading exponentially. Every hour of delay increased the risk of total hive loss. The decision to deploy Titans was made based on available options and projected outcomes. So we were sacrificed because it was convenient, I said. Because we were the least difficult option. You were sacrificed because your death saved billions of others. This is not convenience. This is necessity. The Imperium is built on such necessities." He returned to his data slate. Our conversation apparently concluded. I stood there, wanting to argue further, wanting to rage against the cold logic that had killed my spouse and destroyed my world. But what argument could I make? The mathematics were sound. The logic was unassailable. We had won. The enemy was defeated. The majority survived. By any rational measure, it was a success. But success tasted like ash and blood. I returned to my quarters that evening to find Miria sitting exactly where I had left her, unmoving. The elderly woman watching her reported that she had not spoken all day, had barely eaten, had not responded to any attempts at engagement. I dismissed the woman with thanks, sat beside my daughter. She looked at me with eyes that seemed to belong to someone far older, someone who had seen too much. "Papa," she said quietly, "I have been thinking about Mama." "Tell me," I said, grateful that she was speaking at all. "When Mama died, did it hurt?" I wanted to lie, to tell her it was painless, instant. But I had promised myself I would not lie to her about important things. "Yes," I said. "It hurt. Mama could not breathe. That is painful." Miria nodded as if she had expected this. "And all the other people who died, did it hurt for them too? Some of them died instantly. They would not have felt pain. But others, yes, it hurt." She was quiet for a moment, processing this. "The angels killed them," she said. "Not the bad people. The angels we are supposed to pray to." "The angels were fighting the bad people," I said carefully. "Sometimes, when there is fighting, people who are not bad get hurt too. But Mama was not fighting. Mama was just trying to breathe. And the angels' shields broke Mama's lungs. Why did the angels not know their shields would hurt people?" "They did know," I said. the truth emerging despite my desire to protect her. The angels knew their shields might hurt people, but they had to use the shields to protect themselves from the bad people. So they used them anyway. Miria's face crumpled. Then the angels chose to hurt Mama. They chose to let Mama die. Yes, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They chose. She began to cry. Not the hysterical sobbing of a child, but the deep, wrenching grief of someone who understands loss. I held her, and we cried together, mourning not just Kale, but all the dead, all the millions who had been deemed acceptable losses in the Imperium's calculations. Later that night, after Miria had cried herself into exhausted sleep, I sat at the small table in our borrowed hab and began to write. Not official documentation, not casualty reports, but a personal account, a testimony. I wrote about Kale, about who they were, their work, their kindness, their love for Miria and me. I wrote about our neighbors, the ones I knew had died, describing their lives in whatever detail I could remember. I wrote about the refugees I had seen fall, the people crushed in stairwells, the man who had jumped into the canyon. I wrote their names when I knew them, descriptions when I did not. I recorded how they died, where they died, what they left behind. I documented not for the administratum but for history, for some future person who might want to know that these people had existed, had mattered, had been more than numbers. It was a small act of defiance against the Imperium's mathematics. Insistence that these lives were not just acceptable losses, but tragedies worth recording. Over the following weeks, I continued this secret documentation alongside my official work. I interviewed other survivors when I could, collecting their stories, adding to my growing archive of the forgotten dead. A woman told me about her sister, an artist who painted devotional murals in lesser chapels, crushed when a reaver's footfall collapsed her studio. A man described his partner, a manufactorum foreman who had stayed behind to help evacuate workers and been caught in a fire started by weapons backblast. A child, orphaned, remembered his parents singing to him the night before the Titans came, unaware it was their last night as a family. Each story was specific, personal, individual. Each one a rebuke to the efficient mathematics that had written them off. I kept the documentation hidden, knowing that it bordered on sedition. To suggest that the Imperium's choices were wrong, that the casualties were unacceptable, was to question the fundamental logic of imperial governance. But I could not stop. This felt important in a way nothing else did. 1 month after the battle, the official memorial ceremony was held. The ecclesiarchy organized it, a massive service in one of the surviving cathedrals. Attendance was mandatory for all government personnel, strongly encouraged for all citizens. I brought Miria, both of us wearing the black mourning bands that marked us as bereaved. The cathedral was packed, hundreds of thousands crammed into a space designed for far fewer. The air was close and hot, heavy with incense, meant to mask the smell of unwashed bodies. The service was exactly what I expected. Priests praised the Emperor's mercy, the Mechanicus's wisdom, the Titan's power. They spoke of the dead as blessed martyrs, their sacrifices ensuring the survival of the faithful. They called the battle a great victory, a demonstration of the Imperium's strength against the forces of chaos. Not once did they acknowledge the truth, that most of the dead had died not fighting chaos but fleeing salvation. That the majority of casualties were caused not by the enemy but by our own forces. That we had been saved by being killed. A survivor was brought forward to give testimony. A carefully selected woman who spoke of seeing a Titan destroy the corrupted cathedral, of feeling blessed to witness the Emperor's angels at work. She thanked the Mechanicus for their sacrifice, praised the princeps and moderati who had risked their lives to save the hive. The crowd murmured approval, desperate for any narrative that made sense of the horror. If the dead were martyrs, if the Titans were saviors, if this was all part of the Emperor's plan, then it could be endured. I wanted to stand, to shout the truth, to tell them about Kale dying because their lungs failed, about children crushed under buildings, about people jumping into chasms because death by choice seemed better than death by accident. But I did not. I sat in silence, holding Miria's hand, and let the lies wash over us. After the ceremony, I was approached by a man in administratum robes, his rank insignia marking him as a senior supervisor. "Clerk Vash," he said, "I have been reviewing your work. Your casualty documentation is exemplary, thorough, accurate, efficient." "Thank you, sir," I said automatically. "I would like to offer you a promotion. Assignment to mid-level headquarters, better quarters, increased rations for yourself and your daughter. The Imperium rewards loyal service." I understood immediately what this was. An incentive to continue as I had been, to process death without question, to be a good component in the machine. And with the promotion would come expectations. To speak at ceremonies perhaps, to testify to the Titan's necessary salvation, to become a voice for the official narrative. I thought of my secret documentation, my archive of the forgotten. I thought of Miria, asking why the angels had killed her mother. I thought of the man who had jumped into the canyon, choosing death over complicity. "I need time to consider, sir," I said carefully. The supervisor's expression hardened slightly. "Of course, but do not take too long. Opportunities like this do not remain open indefinitely." He walked away, leaving me to contemplate the choice I had been offered. Comfort and security in exchange for silence. Survival in exchange for complicity. I looked down at Miria. She was staring at a memorial plaque on the cathedral wall, newly installed, listing names of the dead. Thousands of names in tiny script crammed onto a surface meant to hold perhaps hundreds. "Mama's name is not there," she said softly. "No," I said. "There are too many dead. They could not fit all the names. Will people forget Mama?" The question cut deep. Yes, I thought. Eventually, inevitably, Kale would be forgotten. Just another number, another casualty, another component that failed and was replaced. Unless someone remembered. Unless someone insisted on speaking their name, telling their story, preserving their memory against the grinding machinery of imperial forgetting. "No," I said to Miria, making a decision. "We will not forget Mama, and we will make sure others remember too." She looked up at me, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time in weeks. "I will write it down," I said. "Everything about Mama, and about all the others too, so that even when we are gone, someone will know they lived." "Is that allowed?" she asked. I smiled, bitter and sad. "Probably not, but we will do it anyway." We left the cathedral, walking through streets still lined with rubble, past buildings still scarred by the Titan's passage. Above us, the hive continued its eternal function, millions of people going about their lives, trying to rebuild, trying to forget. But I would not forget. I would remember, and in remembering, I would resist the only way I could, by insisting that the dead were more than acceptable losses. They were people. They mattered, and I would make sure that someone, somewhere, someday, would know their names. 6 months had passed since the Titans walked through our world. The hive was healing in its way. Servitor crews worked day and night, clearing rubble, rebuilding structures, restoring systems. The processional, that great scar carved through the heart of our city, was being expanded and reinforced. Next time the Titans came, and everyone knew there would be a next time, the destruction would be more controlled, more efficient. The word efficient haunted me. Everything was efficient now. The reconstruction prioritized strategic infrastructure over residential areas. Food distribution calculated optimal caloric intake for survival, not comfort. Medical services triaged based on productive value to the Imperium. rather than severity of need. Miria and I had been relocated to a new hab, smaller than our original home, deeper in the hive. Level 308, in the upper reaches of what was technically the underhive, though the administratum refused to acknowledge it as such. Our new home was a single room with a shared ablution facility down the corridor. The walls were bare rockcrete, unpainted and stained with moisture. The ceiling leaked when the level above us had plumbing failures, which was often. It was a demotion in all but name. I had refused the promotion, politely but firmly. The supervisor had noted my decision in my personnel file with thinly veiled disapproval. Loyal but lacks ambition, the notation probably read. Adequate for menial work, unsuitable for advancement. My new assignment was data entry, the lowest tier of administratum labor. I processed raw casualty reports from other clerks, inputting their findings into the master database. No analysis, no assessment, just transcription. Mindless work that paid enough to keep Miria and me fed, barely. Miria attended a new schola, a consolidated program that merged survivors from a dozen destroyed institutions. Most of her original classmates were dead. The new children she studied with were all haunted in their own ways, all bearing the invisible scars of what they had witnessed. She spoke more now than in those first terrible weeks, but she was different. The innocent joy of childhood had been burned out of her. She asked questions that children should not need to ask, about death and duty and why the Emperor allowed bad things to happen to good people. I answered as honestly as I could, which meant admitting I did not know. Faith had become complicated for me. I still believed in the Emperor, still performed my daily devotions, still wore the Aquila pendant my father had given me. But my belief had transformed into something the ecclesiarchy would not recognize. I believed the Emperor protected humanity, but I no longer believed that protection was gentle or kind. I believed he grieved for every death, but I no longer believed that grief changed his calculations. I believed we were all components in a vast machine designed for humanity's survival, and I believed that machine cared nothing for individual suffering. This was not heresy, exactly, but it was not orthodox faith either. It was the faith of someone who had watched salvation crush the people it was meant to save and still had to believe it meant something. My secret documentation had grown substantially. I had filled 3 data slates with testimony, hiding them in various locations throughout our hab. I interviewed survivors whenever I could, usually during my meal breaks or in the evening when work was done. Most were eager to talk, desperate to have their losses acknowledged by someone, anyone. I met an elderly man who had lost his entire extended family. 3 generations wiped out when their hab block was compressed by a reaver's footfall. He described each family member in painstaking detail, making me promise to record their names, their professions, their small triumphs and failures. I spoke with a young woman whose partner had been a PDF trooper, killed not by enemy action but by falling debris dislodged by a Titan's void shield interaction with a building. She showed me a pic of him in his dress uniform, proud and young, and utterly unaware he would die not in glorious combat but by accident, collateral damage in someone else's war. I documented the story of a child who had watched his mother fall into a chasm opened by a Titan's footfall, who still had nightmares about her screaming his name as she disappeared into darkness. He was 8 years old and would carry that memory for the rest of his life. Each testimony was specific, personal, impossible to reduce to statistics. This was my small rebellion against the Imperium's mathematics, my insistence that these lives were not just acceptable losses but individual tragedies worth preserving. I knew the risk. Unauthorized documentation could be construed as sedition, particularly if it contradicted official narratives. But I continued anyway, driven by a need I could barely articulate. If I did not remember them, who would? 3 months after the battle, I encountered something that stopped me cold. A remembrancer, an official Imperial artist and historian, had been assigned to document the Titan's victory. She had set up a studio in one of the surviving upper-level galleries, creating a massive mural depicting the battle. I went to see it, drawn by curiosity and a sick fascination. The mural was magnificent from a technical perspective. Soaring images of titans striding through fire and smoke, their weapons blazing, word-bearers falling before them. The Imperator was the centerpiece, depicted as a divine figure, radiant and terrible, purging corruption with holy fire. There were human figures in the mural, tiny against the Titan's scale, but they were shown kneeling in prayer, hands raised in worship and gratitude. The faithful, saved by the Emperor's angels. No crushed bodies, no burning buildings, no refugees fleeing in terror. The remembrancer noticed me studying her work. "Impressive, is it not?" she said, pride evident in her voice. "It will hang in the governor's palace when completed, a testament to the Imperium's might." "It is well executed," I said carefully. "But incomplete." "Incomplete?" Her expression hardened. "What do you mean?" "The people." I gestured to the worshipful figures. "That is not what happened. We were not praying. We were dying." "Artistic interpretation," she said dismissively. "The purpose of art is not literal documentation, but emotional truth. The emotional truth is that the Emperor protected us through his titans." "The emotional truth," I said, my voice rising despite my attempts at control, "is that 37 million people died. The emotional truth is that children watched their parents crushed. The emotional truth is that we were saved by being killed." The remembrancer's face flushed with anger. "That is heresy. The Titans are sacred instruments of the Omnissiah. To suggest they caused unnecessary death is to question the Emperor's wisdom." "I am not questioning wisdom," I said. "I am stating facts. Facts you are choosing to omit from your historical record." "History is not about facts," she replied coldly. "History is about meaning. The Imperium needs heroes, not victims. It needs victories, not complicated moral calculations. My mural serves that need." "And the dead? What about their needs?" "The dead have no needs. They are with the Emperor. It is the living who require inspiration and faith." I wanted to argue further, wanted to force her to acknowledge the reality she was painting over, but I could see it was pointless. She was not interested in truth, only in narrative. Her art would be displayed, praised, studied by future generations who would learn a comfortable lie rather than an uncomfortable reality. I left without another word, returning to our hab to add this encounter to my documentation. "The Imperium's amnesia was not accidental," I wrote. "It was deliberate, systematic, a choice to forget what was inconvenient and remember only what served." But I would not forget. Even if my documentation was eventually destroyed, even if no one ever read it, the act of remembering was itself resistance. Miria had begun drawing, not the cheerful child art of her early years, but something darker, more honest. She drew our old hab as she remembered it, with Kale smiling in the doorway. She drew the Titans as she had seen them, monstrous and terrible and beautiful all at once. "What is this?" I asked gently. "Us," she said. "After, when the angels left and Mama was gone. Just us, together." He drew the refugees in the stairwells, the bodies in the rubble, the emptiness of our current home. I kept every drawing, adding them to my archive. Her art was testimony too, perhaps more powerful than my words. She was processing her trauma, yes, but also bearing witness, creating a record that could not be dismissed as adult agenda or political bias. One evening, she showed me a new drawing. It was simple, almost abstract. Two figures, one large and one small, standing together in darkness. Behind them, massive shadows that might have been titans or might have been titans or might have been mountains or might have been both. "What is this?" I asked gently. "Us," she said. "After, when the angels left and Mama was gone. just us, together. I hung the drawing on our wall, the only decoration in our sparse hab. It was not hope, exactly, but it was something. Endurance, perhaps. The determination to continue despite everything. We developed a ritual, Miria and I. Once a month, we would return to the canyon, to the great scar the Titans had carved through our world. It had been converted into a memorial park. The processional preserved in its damaged state as a reminder of what had happened here. Official plaques lined the canyon's edge, describing the battle in approved terms. Glorious victory against chaos corruption. The Emperor's angels triumphant. The faithful saved through sacrifice and devotion. We ignored the plaques. Instead, we would find the approximate location where our old hab level had been, now 40 levels down under collapsed rubble, and we would leave flowers. Real flowers, grown in upper hive hydroponics at obscene cost, but worth every throne to have something living to place in memory of the dead. Kale lived here, I would say quietly. Remembered. Miria would add her own remembrance. Mama was kind. Mama sang to me. Mama loved us. Then we would stand in silence, bearing witness. We were not alone in this unofficial ritual. Others came too, leaving their own tokens, speaking their own remembrances. Small acts of defiance against the official narrative, insisting that the dead were more than martyrs in a glorious victory. I met some of them, adding their stories to my documentation. A woman who left flowers for her brother, killed when a warhound's plasma blast gun's thermal backblast ignited a fuel depot. A man who placed a child's toy for his daughter, crushed in the evacuation panic. An elderly couple who came together to remember their entire neighborhood, dozens of people they had known for decades, all gone in minutes. We formed an informal community, bound not by geography or profession but by shared loss and the determination to remember honestly. We were careful not to attract official attention, never gathering in large groups, never speaking openly about our doubts regarding the official narrative. But we knew, and knowing mattered. 6 months after the battle, news arrived that shook the hive. Legio Metallica was redeploying, summoned to another world where an Orc WAAGH threatened an Imperium fortress. The Titans would leave within a week. The announcement provoked complicated reactions. Relief that these dangerous saviors would be gone. Guilt over feeling relief. Fear that without the Titans' protection, we would be vulnerable to the next threat. I went to watch them depart, compelled by the same need that had driven me to witness their arrival. The embarkation was a massive ceremony, the Mechanicus performing elaborate rites, priests blessing the god machines, officials praising their service. The Imperator was loaded last, ascending on a massive lift platform toward the orbital docks. Even dormant, even powered down for transit, it was magnificent and terrible. I watched it rise, disappearing into the hive's upper reaches, and I felt nothing but exhaustion. Miria stood beside me. "Will they come back?" she asked. "Probably," I said. "If we need them." "I hope we never need them," she said quietly. "Me too, little one. Me too, but I knew we would need them eventually." The galaxy was filled with threats, and the Imperium had few weapons capable of meeting the greatest of them. The Titans would walk again, through our city or another, and millions more would die so billions could live. This was the mathematics of survival in the Imperium. This was what the Emperor's protection meant, and we, the saved, had to live with that knowledge. I returned to my documentation that evening, adding a final entry for this phase of the archive. "The Titans have left," I wrote. "The hive continues. We rebuild what they destroyed to save us. We bury our dead and tend our wounded and try to find meaning in what happened. I do not know if I have found meaning, but I have found purpose. To remember, to testify, to insist that the dead were people, not numbers, that their lives mattered, their deaths were tragedies, and the cost of our survival was real." This is my small defiance against the Imperium's efficient amnesia. This is how I honor KL and all the others who died when the angels walked through our city. I am Aaron Vash. I survived, and I will remember. You ask what happens when Titans walk through your city. Everything ends and nothing changes. Your world dies and the Imperium continues, grinding forward with mechanical indifference to individual suffering. The scale is incompatible. Humans are too small for gods to notice. Our lives too brief for their eternal vigil to honor. But this is not condemnation. In the grim darkness of the far future, there are no good choices, only necessary ones. The Titans saved 23 billion by killing 37 million. The mathematics are clear, even if the mathematics do not grieve. We grieve. We must. Faith means seeing clearly and believing anyway, acknowledging the cruelty while accepting the necessity. The Emperor protects, and his protection has many faces, not all of them kind. Miria and I stand at our window now, watching the sky. Somewhere distant, thunder rumbles. Might be weather, might be war, might be Titans walking on another world. She does not flinch anymore. She has learned to live with it. The Emperor protects. I believe this. But protection and salvation are not the same. When angels walk through your city, you learn the difference in your bones, in your losses, in the empty spaces where loved ones stood. You carry that learning forward, quiet testimony that even necessary angels leave more than victory. They leave witnesses, we who remain, we who remember, we who say, they were here, we survived, and the cost was real, and we will not forget.